Lawyers, what happened when you fell in love with your client? Story 1. Hello, I am a victim of abuse. My legal case began before COVID. Then it had to be put off for quite a while before finally we switched over to Zoom. And now I sometimes go in for questions. Before I begin my post, I would like to state that I am fully aware that a romantic or sexual relationship between my attorney and me would be highly inappropriate and fiduciary. I obviously do not plan on actually trying to have any sort of romantic relationship with him. I am simply venting and also requesting advice on how to deal with or get over my feelings for him. What started as a small crush has gotten very out of control. It's been almost a year since I've met my lawyer, and throughout this time I've shared things with him that I've never shared with anyone else, and I've gotten to know him. It could just be that because I've been abused and am now highly sensitive, I am latching on to the only person who is kind to me, but it feels like a lot more than that. His caring about me isn't anywhere near the only reason for me liking him. I've gotten to know a lot about him throughout our time together, and I'm truly just so in love with who he is as a person. He's funny and kind, very opinionated about quirky things, he's really good at photography in his spare time, and I can talk to him about literally anything, and he will always be super engaged. We love a lot of the same things, such as art and video games, and we listen to the same music. I've found a ton of new songs through his suggestions. Incredibly hilarious guy. He makes me crack up so incredibly hard. I've never seen a lawyer as chill as he is. Like I said, this started as a really harmless crush, but it's gotten to the point now where I have dreams about him, and think about kissing him or holding his hand while I'm talking to him about my case, which just feels kind of wrong. I can't help it though. He gives me butterflies so bad I don't think I've felt this way about anyone since elementary school. I'm thinking about him at inappropriate times, and I feel bad because he is just trying to be friendly towards me, but I'm making it weird. I really need help to get over these feelings so I can get through this and take things seriously. I am so distracted by him, and cannot stop imagining myself in these scenarios where we're in love. Please help, I'm losing my mind. I don't want to be in love with him. It's going to hurt so much once this case is finally over. I don't know how to deal with this and make my feelings less intense. Should I talk to a therapist about this? Will my therapist get me in trouble? I don't know what to do. I know this is well above Reddit's pay grade, but I really don't have anyone else to talk to at the moment. I would just appreciate any advice at all. Thank you for reading. Story 2. I received an explicit photo at 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't figure out who it was from. I got to the office the next morning and checked the number in the database. It was a client I was working with on the sale of his business. As far as I knew, he was heterosexual and married. We closed the deal a few weeks later, and he wanted to go out for steaks to celebrate. I said no thanks, I had to get back. But he insisted. It was very awkward. He finally asked me what was wrong, and at this point I asked why he had sent me an explicit photo. You could see embarrassment, and a eureka moment hit his face at the same time. "Ah, man, I am sorry," he said. It turned out he thought he was sending it to a woman he met in a club. I had only called him from my cell once, and he thought my number was hers. After that, the tension was broken and we had a great meal. 6 months later, I represented him in a knockdown, drag-out divorce. The only weird moment was when he asked, "You have seen it. Don't you think she is a fool for giving it up?" I did not answer that question, but did bill him for 1/10 of an hour for the question. Story 3. I'm going through the process of divorce and all of its emotional challenges. My ex was abusive. My divorce attorney witnessed some of my ex's abusive behavior and helped to get away from my ex. Because my divorce lawyer helped me, I developed strong feelings for him. I'm not sure what to do. I'm a well-educated professional. I feel like the feelings are mutual. However, since we have a professional relationship, neither of us has acted on it. I worried it's just a rebound, or he's using me when I'm vulnerable, but he seems like a genuinely nice person. I'm not sure if I'd be into him in normal situations, but I really developed strong feelings. Talk me out of this incredibly awkward situation. Story 4. I recently interviewed a woman who had a tough start to life. She married, in her words, a brute because her father was one. She eventually became unhappy enough that she told a friend who referred her to a lawyer he deemed trustworthy to help her initiate divorce proceedings. She went to his office that afternoon. Then they went for dinner. Then they went dancing. Then he referred her to a different lawyer, and they were together for the next 40 years in an extremely happy union. You never know, you know. He was kind to you before you met in person, which is a good sign. Give him a call if you're into him. Story 5. May was a really bad month for me. A whole slew of really bad things happened. In addition to many other things, I had 2 motor vehicle incidents resulting in a total of 7 citations. To set the stage for how serious this was, I was facing jail time and several years of suspension. Just so you know, there was no driving while intoxicated involved, and nobody at all was hurt. But the citations were still serious. I tried to hire a lawyer and basically got screamed at by the first one I consulted with for how silly I was, and he couldn't believe the situation I was in, and quoted me a fee of $5,000. To get a second opinion, I called the second lawyer, Mark. Mark was extremely courteous and respectful. He said it was serious, but he didn't berate me, and he was more about problem solving. He quoted me a way lower price. Because of his courteous and reasonable attitude, I went with him. Mark and I had to go to court twice. I had never been to court before, and the first time I was shaking uncontrollably, and then started crying, which was really embarrassing. Mark started telling me jokes to cheer me up and make me laugh. Then we just started talking, and he told me all about his hobbies and what he does in his free time. Finally, the court started, and Mark got rid of 75% of my problems right then. A month goes by and we have to go to court a second time to finish up. We had to sit in the court for a really long time because the judge was late. I wasn't really stressed this time because only the minor issues were left. I was calm and I was fine with just reading stuff on my phone. But Mark really wanted to talk, and he told me all about this event he did on the weekend. He showed me lots of pics from his phone of himself at the event and his kids. We talked a lot about the event because it's an interest we have in common. He is new to it, but I have done it for years. For the sake of privacy, let's say the event was square dancing. Finally, the court started, and Mark was making fun of the judge to make me laugh. He was nudging and whispering ridiculous things to me while the judge was giving a serious speech. Other lawyers were sitting on the other side of him, and they were all joking with each other. It seemed like a thing they usually do. Finally, it was my turn, and Mark immediately got rid of the rest of my problems. In the end, out of all 7 citations, the fines and points I ended up with were probably about 10 to 15% of what they could have been, and I had no other punishment besides fines. So I was extremely happy when we walked out of the court, and I thanked Mark so much for helping me. For the first time, he seemed quite nervous, and he pulled his business card out of his pocket, but he dropped it and his pen all over the floor and started apologizing. Then he said the following: "You know, I meet nice people in all kinds of strange situations. Feel free to call me if you ever want to talk about square dancing or anything." I said, "Okay, thank you." And that was it. I went to pay my fines and he left. Now I have a few questions. Was that him asking me out? Honestly, I did feel a vibe of attraction between us the whole time, but what he said is kind of ambiguous. Second, if he did ask me out, is it unethical of him? Third, would it be a bad idea? I do think it's a little weird to make friends with women defendants you meet while representing them as a criminal defense attorney. Or is this like bartenders, where they are meeting women in their line of work all the time, women are getting involved with them, making it usually a bad idea to date them? Not to put any shade on bartenders, but generally, in my observation from seeing friends try to do this, getting involved with your bartender doesn't generally lead to a long-term relationship, even if you end up getting involved. What are your overall thoughts on this? Too long, didn't read. Me, a 28 years old female, with my lawyer, a 38 years old male. Did he ask me out? If he did, is that unethical of him? I'm curious, but would it be a bad idea? Story 6. Original me, a 28 years old female, with my lawyer, a 38 years old male. Did he ask me out? If he did, is that unethical of him? I'm curious, but would it be a bad idea? Well, Mark actually called me the next morning after my post, and I missed his call. Then I called him back, but he wasn't in. I was a little anxious in case it had to do with my case, something had gone wrong, or I owed him money. But I didn't think it was actually any of those, and I was also curious to see what he would say. I missed a second call from him and called him back in the evening, and he was there. He started out by saying, "So everything in your case went really well." I said, "Yes, it did. Thank you so much." He said, "No problem. Actually, I was wondering, would you leave me a review online, like on a review website? It would really help my business." I said, "Sure, no problem." He said, "Great. If you could leave it on a review website, that would be perfect." I said, "Okay, I will." He said, "Great." And then he repeated the line he had said to me in the court. Pretty much the same, but this time he said it faster, as if it was a script. "It was great to meet you. I meet nice people in the strangest of places. Feel free to call me if you have any questions." I said, "Okay, thank you, and take care." It seemed like he was just trying to build rapport with me for future business and recommendations. And possibly he thinks I might need legal help in the future. Too long. Didn't read. I think he was just networking for business. Story 7. I did once and felt very uncomfortable given our professional rules, and as a guy who can be accused of sexual misconduct easily. It was a client I was representing in immigration court. She had an asylum case, was involved in a bad domestic violence situation, and had been sexually assaulted. I was one of the first persons she shared that with, so she had been vulnerable with me, a guy, who did not judge her like other men in her home country might. I had her wait for me at a coffee shop before we went into court. I was picking up an 8-year-old client for his case as well, and Mom was undocumented and couldn't go into immigration court. As soon as the domestic violence client saw me, she ran to me to give me a hug. I'm a huggable guy, so I didn't think much of it. We walked to the courthouse and I had her go into the courtroom on her own because I had the 8-year-old, who had court on a different floor, and each floor had its own security. I told her to wait and sit tight inside her courtroom, and I'd come to her after I'd finished the 8-year-old's case and returned him to his mother. But while we were in the elevator, she was asking if I was married and had a wife. Weird, but no. After finishing the 8-year-old's case, I went back to the coffee shop, returned him to his mom, and explained a bit about what happened, and returned to my domestic violence client. She was being weird, saying she thought I left her and forgot about her, and wasn't coming back. I looked at her like she was crazy, because she saw me with the 8-year-old boy whose hand I held. I told her I had to handle that case first, but she was being toxic. I, being a good attorney thinking about her work permit, asked our support staff if they could check how many days she had on the asylum clock to see if she was eligible for a work permit. And she's asking if I'm texting my wife. I have been single for years. I am a workaholic. I cannot commit. I said no, and she told me to stop lying that I do have a wife, and I'm texting her. I was starting to get annoyed. Told her I'm texting our support staff to figure out where she is on her work permit, so I can advise her about that. We do her hearing. Yes, all that stuff was in court. And on the way out, she keeps asking about why I'm not married yet, and I wanted to be like, because marrying so young at 18 is not a good idea, but didn't want to attack her. I asked if she wanted to debrief about her case at the coffee shop, which I do for all clients because we are primarily talking in Spanish. I give a recap about dates, I'd assign homework, and we'd go on our merry way. She took it as a date, I think, and she was trying to buy me food at the coffee shop, and I said, no, thank you. And she turned it into a, why are you so unappreciative of what I'm trying to buy you? Yes, I know it is not a word in English, but unappreciative is too passive, and in Spanish it is more active and direct. She was giving me attitude, and my inner big bro had to come out and told her not to disrespect me like that after I just fought for her in court and bought her some time. She calmed down. She then said she felt embarrassed and maybe I shouldn't work on her case anymore, so I said that's fine. I can get a female attorney from the office to handle her case if it makes her more comfortable. She backpedaled, said she was very comfortable with me and didn't want me assigning it out. She then tried inviting me to her birthday party. No, I didn't go. I got back to the office late and didn't get to eat lunch because where I wanted to go closed down. I was so upset. I got into the office and told them what happened. I was the only male in the office, and I told them I didn't know how to handle this. I didn't think I was leading her on or anything. And they laughed, because it's the third time this has happened to me. The previous two were more obvious. This one was more subtle. I thought she was being an annoying little sister or something. I just want to help people and get paid. I don't want any drama. And I felt bad, because I know she was vulnerable. And maybe she was latching on to me because I was the first guy who listened and didn't judge. But I can't be her therapist or boyfriend. I'm her lawyer, and I don't want to be accused of anything. Story 8. It happens. Women who suddenly don't understand personal space, they have to touch you. Who want to keep veering the consultation to personal questions, etc. I recall several years ago, I had a young female client I was helping with an ongoing custody dispute. I knew she was in a new relationship that was very serious. Midway when going over all the issues, I had to take a quick break. When I came back, I resumed my questions by starting a new line of info and asking about her relationship. To my surprise, she denied having one. I asked again, saying I was sure she had an ex. She quickly responded with, "Nope." I then mentioned him by name, to which she said he wasn't anything serious, just someone she saw sometimes. I was really confused. I knew this was simply not true. Then I realized that as we were going back and forth, she had lighted up, beaming, was now leaning towards me, big smile, with tilted head, and playing with her hair. I took a step back, explained I was asking, because these issues would certainly come up at the hearing, and we needed to be prepared. The look of disappointment was massive. She then began explaining all about her fiancé and their wedding date, etc. Story 9. Every woman who works in criminal defense has been hit on by clients, probably hundreds of times. It's just part of the job, unfortunately. I've personally been proposed to in the courtroom while waiting for a case to be called. Asked out via text after the client missed court due to his girlfriend giving birth. Made an inappropriate request while in jail, etc., etc., etc. I had a colleague old enough to be many clients, grandmother, and she was still getting hit on. Oh yeah, the clients are the least of it. At least I didn't have to see them again after their cases ended. It always felt like I couldn't get my cases called or be let in to see my clients in jail without putting up with court/jail staff flirting. Older attorneys hit on me and told inappropriate stories while I was stuck sitting next to them, waiting for our cases to be called. When I was brand new, a judge clearly hazed me on the record, then came down off the bench to say judges can be mean sometimes, while inappropriately approached me. I've never worked in such a tense and uncomfortable environment before or since. Story 10. I represented a married woman on a criminal defense matter. The criminal charge was alleged by her boyfriend, and her sugar daddy paid my fee, neither of whom were her husband. He was living in a different state taking care of her kids. She behaved inappropriately towards me, and after our trial, invited me to socialize outside of work. I played dumb and told her my girlfriend wouldn't be comfortable with that. Story 11. Happens in family and criminal law pretty regularly. There are subtle things a female client will do. Grab your arm from across the table during a meeting, call you after hours, and try to meet for lunch. I had a girl not pay me $750 for 2 driving without insurance tickets, and offered an inappropriate alternative instead. I politely declined, and had to explain to her that although she is very pretty, I cannot pay my bills that way, and I needed that money for a down payment on a custom suit. She paid me reluctantly and called me gay. The suit was beautiful. Story 12. I had a client comment enthusiastically at the end of a successful domestic violence trial on how effectively I questioned her ex on cross. I noped out of there as soon as possible, and I was very glad the case was already over so I didn't have to deal with that. It was the best compliment I've ever gotten on my legal work, though. Story 13. I used to advise a luxury home builder. Occasionally, I'd visit the sales office for consultations and be available during open house events. One time, a client purchased a $5 million property and kept sharing stories about her incredible experiences. Skiing in the Alps, weekends at the Savoy, lazy afternoons at Lake Como, and so on. I listened politely, expressing how amazing it all sounded. Then, out of nowhere, she reached out, touched my arm lightly, and said, "I'm taking you to the French Riviera next month. You have no choice." She was a successful businesswoman, about 10 years older than me at the time, and it was all very flattering. I politely declined, citing a packed schedule, but the moment was surreal. Story 14. I had a divorce client send me an email asking if it was okay if she started dating before her divorce was final. But she didn't stop there. She asked other questions like, what if he is a lawyer? And what if he took me to a movie? And then the questions became inappropriate and focused on me as her lawyer. I freaked out and called our state bar ethics hotline. I guess I'm just a giant nerd. Story 15. I had a client who had a personal injury case worth a ton of money ask me to do something inappropriate. I was like, no way. Case settled, and she asked again. I turned it down. Another time I had a married couple as clients. The husband called me and said, "I know you're involved with my wife." It was not true. Long story short, I had to withdraw and carry a gun for about 6 months because he went completely psycho. Story 16. The biggest mistake of my legal career was having a relationship with a manager for my biggest client. He initiated it, and I was afraid to reject him. The success of my business depended on this client. I wanted to end it but could not, for fear of losing the business. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Fortunately, he was fired for other reasons, but I learned my lesson. Don't do it. Story 17. One of my clients hits on me all the time, and we have an intimate relationship. Because he's my husband. We were married before he was ever a client of the firm. But he has intermittent family law problems, and I'm a family law lawyer in a firm filled with other family law lawyers. I do most of the work, but someone else's name goes on any official documents. Otherwise, yes, and it's gross every time. Sir, you're engaged in litigation. I'm your lawyer. I know way more details about you than I'd like, and none of them make you remotely attractive even if you have a nice face. Even if I was single and not your lawyer, knowing what I know about you, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Because it's never the ones with simple disputes who are genuinely good people that do it, since they know better than to flirt with their divorce attorney. Story 18. Have had it happen a few times. When I was 27, a very nice, recently divorced 45-year-old lady called me after a foreclosure consultation to confess her feelings and tell me how she just wanted to take risks and put herself out there. I felt terrible for her and went hyper-professional with customer service mode. Yes, M. So-and-so, I'm sorry, M. So-and-so, I'm unable to do that, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding your foreclosure case. A guy made a disturbing and inappropriate proposition. This week, a client's wife, in a friendly divorce, made an inappropriate gesture toward me while we were waiting for our case to be called. People are seeing us because they're going through some difficult situations. At this point, the insane behaviors barely register. Story 19. Before I was a lawyer, I was a paralegal in family law. The attorney I worked for was very attractive. Dressed well, long blonde hair, designer suits, sophisticated. One day she opened up her email while talking with me, and we were greeted with an explicit nude photo of one of our male clients, with the subject, "Like what you see." We both sat in stunned silence for a minute. She did not know what to do. She chatted with the firm partner, a no-nonsense man of Italian heritage, who promptly called the client and told him what was what. The client apologized and nothing further happened, but I saw other attorneys and even judges hitting on her all the time. She really put up with some stuff. Story 20. Not a client, but similar. I interned at a small law firm in my hometown the summer I was 19. I covered the front desk when the receptionist was out one afternoon. One of our attorneys was the county mental health commissioner and heard petitions for involuntary commitments to mental health facilities. A police officer accompanied one woman whose family filed a petition because she'd been arrested earlier in the day. She was claiming to have multiple personalities and switching between them while she was waiting for her hearing. One of her personalities was saying that she had a medical issue and yelling about severe symptoms. It was graphic and gross. And while she was screaming about her condition, the 32-year-old cop was trying to ask me on a date to go hang out at a bar later that night. I wasn't at all interested, so I said I wasn't 21 yet and couldn't go to a bar. So he pointed to his badge and said, "I think I can do something about that." I can't remember my response, but it was a very bad, weird afternoon for me. Story 21. Long before I became Attorney South Style, I was a legal assistant in a family law firm. I was all of 18, give or take. We had one client who was a Navy pilot, 31, in the middle of a divorce, obviously, with 3 kids. He calls one day to speak with the attorney. I explain the attorney is with another client, but I'm happy to take a message. He's not thrilled, and we go back and forth for a bit with me essentially explaining that I can't force the attorney to take his call. He pauses and says, "You're the cute blonde one, right?" EW. "Sure, I guess. I'll take you for the best steak dinner at Ruth's Chris, if you get her on the phone right now." Double EW. "Also, sir, I've seen your financials. You can barely afford Steak and Shake." In my sweetest, girliest voice, "Well, okay, let me see what I can do." I put him on hold. It rings back. I put him on hold again. The attorney walks by to copy something for the client she's actually with, and sees me pick the phone up and put it back on hold. She asks me who's on hold, and I explain the situation and that I'm leaving him on hold to see how bad he really wants to talk to her. She laughs and walks back in her office and shuts the door. He did not speak with the attorney that day. Story 22. This happened a couple years back when I was 29. I'm a white guy. My client was an 87-year-old black woman. She spent the entire initial meeting hitting on me. And not in the charming older lady saying you're handsome way. In an overtly forward and inappropriate way. Thankfully her daughter was in the room, because I was certainly tempted. Story 23. A judge in my county was having an affair with a state trooper who was a witness in a murder trial she handled. Her husband was divorcing her, and he found out about the affair and it went public. She got jail time. And the murder got a new trial. Story 24. If the lawyer is someone you are paying for out of pocket, I would say it's okay because if it goes south, it's your money and your case. So if you decide to handle it that way, consider it a lesson learned. However, if you are a public defender being personally involved with a former client who was once an inmate and got a not guilty sentence, it looks bad, especially if the case was high profile. It probably wouldn't last. Someone is bound for a broken heart, usually the attorney, and nothing good would come from it. They are inmates for a reason, and you would be used, at that point, until the former inmate gets back on their feet, then they move on to other personal relationships. Story 25. A former boss worked in family law. He had a client that couldn't pay her bill. He hired her as a secretary, had her work her own case. Then he started a sexual relationship with her. I probably should have said or done something about it, but I was a young law clerk. He treated me really well, still does, and I had poor judgment. Story 26. Get away as soon as possible if there is even a hint of that crap. As a young associate, I was directed to meet with our early 20s plaintiff in her family's tiny little rural house. Case was a side gig for one of the big partners. He never worked on it himself, by the way. Rest of her family/relatives were around the house, but then left. I found myself sitting in the breakfast nook with her, trying to go over her deposition testimony. She was in a tank top and cutoffs, etc., and kept making comments. At some point, she said something like, "You know, if you wanted to engage in something inappropriate, no one would know." I noped out politely. Story 27. I practice family law, and I am a young, decent-looking, I think, guy. I've had 2 female clients try to make a move on me, one much more subtly than the other. In my jurisdiction, it's not outright prohibited to have relations with a client, but I personally think you'd have to be incredibly foolish to get personally involved with a client going through a divorce. There was a lawyer in my city who actually married his client after her divorce, and that ended very badly for him because, lo and behold, they separated, and she made a litany of allegations against him. The answer should always be an emphatic and unequivocal no. Story 28. I am doing solicitor/tax attorney work for an attractive client. Was not an issue until my partner asked for divorce a couple of months back. I had many attractive clients over time. I can control myself. Scheduled a regular meeting with client and her mother for the first time for one of their family's transactions. Client suggested to take advantage of the mild weather and meet, physically distance, outdoor for lunch in her backyard. Client's own divorce was a relevant fact to the transaction. The discussion went down that avenue, and I disclosed my pending divorce. Her mother, possibly helped by the good wine that accompanied lunch, commented positively about the writer, saying she already loves me. She broke physical distancing protocols and kissed me on the forehead on her way back indoor, leaving me and my client mildly amused. I admitted to the client that I find her attractive, and half-jokingly said I wish she was not a client so I could ask her out on a date. And against expectation, she expressed interest. I reread Chapter 3 of Ontario's Rules of Professional Conduct. There is nothing specific about romantic involvement with the client. The areas of concern addressed by Chapter 3 are not relevant to this situation. What should I do? Story 29. Brand new here. Just made this account because I wasn't sure where else to find answers. I'm currently a third-year law student, interning in Big Law. Yesterday, I was asked to attend a social function on behalf of my firm with my team to meet with a prospective client in hopes of getting them to agree to retain us. Over the course of the evening, the prospective client, only a few years older than me, and I got to talking and had an obvious connection, which ultimately led to him asking me out. He then informed me that he had every intention of retaining the firm I work for and would be in soon to fill out the paperwork. I told him no, but he is being persistent. Obviously, according to Model Rule 1.8J, as long as the romantic relationship begins before the attorney/client relationship, it's not a violation of ethics. Further, I'm not quite an attorney yet. July 2024, pray for me. So I'm fairly confident I wouldn't be violating ethics in that sense. I looked into my company's policy as it applies to interns, specifically, and found nothing on the matter, which confuses me even more because why not? I'm very close with my two direct supervisors, and I don't quite feel comfortable enough to bring this to their attention yet. I just need guidance/the industry standards/others, office's policies on the matter. I don't know. I'm at a loss here. Maybe I'm just being stupid and it's obviously wrong, but that's why I came here. It won't kill me either way, whether I do or do not go out with this guy. I just need some perspective. Story 30. I know one attorney who dated a former client in family law of all things. Very much against the state bar's rules. She's happy with him, but she's kept it a secret in her field, and she switched firms. 4 years of secrets. Not for me, but hey, maybe you'd be okay with that kind of thing? I think that's the only real way to handle such a thing and not have it damage your reputation or worse. Do you trust this guy to keep a secret? Trust yourself. Story 31. I was working as a general practice paralegal when a new law school graduate started at my firm. He was waiting on bar results. He asked me so many questions about estate planning and how to draft documents. I thought it was funny, and he was just trying to learn. Cue a few months later, and we started becoming friends. A year after that, I started getting the feeling he liked me. I wasn't going to date someone I worked with. Some time goes by, and we become even better friends. A female associate started at our firm. That's when it hit me. I would hate it if he became close to her. I liked him, and I didn't want anyone else to have him. Long story short, I am sitting next to him on the couch, with our 6-month-old daughter in between us. He is the absolute love of my life. He is a magistrate now, and I am a family law paralegal. We definitely are living the dream. Story 32. Was working at a law firm and had been there about 3 years, and this place was very toxic. Why I stayed as long as I did is beyond me. But my supervisor decided to promote me to a lead. Great, it came with a raise, and I was doing a good job in keeping stuff from falling through the cracks. I was also having to clean up a giant mess from the previous lead, who quit unexpectedly. About a week or two later, after I started my new position, he calls me into his office and says, "Hey, we're going in a different direction. You'll still get to keep your raise." He never tells me that I have been put back to my old position. I go back to doing what I'm doing. About an hour later, an email comes out letting everyone know I have been replaced. You could hear me screaming across the floor, "What on earth?" I went stomping into his office where the door had been closed. I just flung it open and exposed my boss in a compromising situation with the new team lead. I was upset, but I told them I didn't care if I was lead or not, I was keeping my raise. My boss got reassigned to a different team, and the team lead was put in a different department from me. She only lasted another few weeks because apparently he was protecting her and claiming she was meeting deadlines when she wasn't. Story 33. That time I got my college roommate hired as an associate at my firm. Then he became my boss, and coincidentally, we had both ended our previous relationships of around 10 years each. I'd always had a crush on him, even back in college when he, I, and both of our respective exes lived together with 4 other roommates. We were ultimately good friends, and kept it platonic until he became my boss. It was a very intense and exciting period of my life. We exchanged flirty messages while at work. He'd leave playful notes or messages referring to work I did for him. He'd take me to lunch nearly every day unless one of us cooked for the other and brought each other leftovers. Story 34. I am married to a lawyer, going on 15 years. He practices criminal defense. He was the one who taught me better communication skills. He is calm and thoughtful when we argue, and has never called me a bad name when he is frustrated with me. I am the one early in our relationship who would shut down and give the silent treatment when I was mad. Mostly because I was afraid to show him the rage and anger I learned growing up in an abusive household. During my periods of silence, he would sit quietly nearby, and finally he asked me, how could he get me to say anything? I told him I was a better writer than a speaker. Eventually, when we would fight, silent fight, he would slip pieces of paper under the door so I could write what I was feeling. Now, many years later, we can talk things out, and I credit that to him. We never yell, curse, or call each other names, even when we are angry with each other. And it's such a departure from how I grew up, filled with verbal, emotional, mental, and at times physical abuse. Instead, I now have a peaceful, loving, and respectful home, in large part due to my lawyer husband. Now for the cons. As no one is perfect, he is a workaholic, especially at his most recent workplace. Yet, so am I. I am an engineer. However, I would say he probably struggles more with time management than I do, which is something he openly admits, and we talk about it. And he makes efforts towards time off and quality time together. But our jobs define us quite a bit, and in a way, because we both have that tendency, we are empathetic towards each other. We talk and commiserate over it, and work together towards a better work-life balance. Overall, our life together has been wonderful. We traveled the world, shared many adventures together, have lots of hobbies in common, are similar in temperament, and are financially successful. I would recommend marrying/partnering with a lawyer over an engineer. Again, I am the engineer, but that's just me, and I might be biased.